the trick is to focus on the positive and sort of minimize the negative. It's not hide the negative, it's deal with the negative and then embrace the positive. And I didn't really understand how it worked at the time. It's some element of affirmations. I was saying to myself when I first gave up bad days, I'd be like, today's a good day, today's a good day, today's a good day, just over and over again. And this was back in the mid 90s. And I didn't know what affirmations were. YouTube didn't exist. So I never heard of Tony Robbins or any of that. I just went out and did it. I just said, today's a good day over and over again.
It was almost like a survival tool for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, it really was. And then one day I walked into a convenience store, and the guy behind the counter said to me, he said, "Hey, how you doing today?" And I just said, I never have bad days. And then I went, holy crap, I never have bad days. I just realized that it had been a month or two since I'd had my last bad day. If you look at your ordinary existence and say, like, what can I do that's just a little bit extra, right? Then you get to be extraordinary. And that's, to me, that's like, it's freaking gold.
Our guest today is driven by his last life ever mentality and has scratched off many travel destinations on his bucket list. He's a high-performing real estate investor that's passionate about helping people live the best possible version of themselves. After an incredible comeback story, he's a self-made millionaire with over 250 residential units in his personal real estate portfolio. Welcome to the show, co-host of the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show and also the Last Life Ever podcast, Jeffrey Holst.
Hey, thanks so much for having me here.
You got a lot going on, man. Appreciate you hanging out and jumping on the show here. Your story, when I prepare for these interviews, right? Typically, I'm like, there's a lot of deep diving I go into to kind of find what's going to surface so we can bring the best story and conversation to the audience. And with yours, it was like I was taking so many notes and just it like you did that video. It's kind of a summary video. And I was like, this is it. Like it's written. The story's written. It's just a matter of letting Jeff come on the show, tell his story, connect with the audience. So that's really what I'd love to do today is set it up that way. I got to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Dr. Jamil Sayed, for connecting us. He's also a guest on the show. So if you guys are interested in learning more about Dr. Jamil, check him out. He was a guest. But you ready to dive in?
Sure. Yeah, no. And actually that video you referenced, it's a blessing and a curse, actually, because once I put that out, then that's all we ever talk about. But it is the important stuff. So that's good. I mean, so it's a real blessing as well.
Well, I want to hit on some highlights. We can go, there's many roads that we can travel down, talk about a lot of the cool things they're doing, both in real estate, business, traveling. Your mindset and mentality is really what I want to pick apart a little bit here. Because again, realize that most of the people tuning in are going to be entrepreneurial. Maybe they're early on and getting the confidence to get out of either their corporate situation or whatever their life looks like, kind of taking that next step. And there's going to be people who've done that and they're just like, man, I need some help. Jeff, what do you got for me today? What kind of tidbits can I take away, apply to my own life and execute on those? So I'm going to set up this question with a little bit of your story because I didn't want your bio to be too long because you would have been taking a nap by the time we got to you.
For sure.
So, I mean, you married the girl of your dreams and you seem to have it all. Everything was going extremely well for you. Beautiful house in the suburbs, thriving law practice. And then all of a sudden, one day, about 10 years later, boom, right? It completely turned around for you.
Yeah.
Find yourself in the hospital, just to wrap the story up. And you appeared to be on your deathbed. Business was in disarray, and it seemed like you were on your way to bankruptcy. Can you fast forward us to 10 years later? Now you're back on top, like I mentioned earlier, millionaire, 250 residential units in your personal portfolio. Walk us through that incredible comeback story.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, what you said is true. I actually ended up going bankrupt. So, 2010, I went bankrupt. I was a bankruptcy attorney before that, so it was a little ironic. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't. I had spent the majority of my time up until that point just sort of like spending time thinking about, how can I make money so that I can do things like travel. I didn't really think about what was really important to me. And that I think that's the real problem. If you're not living authentic an authentic version of your life, then you really you put yourself in a situation where you're vulnerable. And I mean, it wasn't my fault per se that I got leukemia, and that's what happened to me. I was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia in 2008. Ended up spending a significant portion of 2008 and 2009 not able to work. And when you run a small law practice with two attorneys, one being yourself and then the other one quitting a week before you get diagnosed with leukemia, it puts a little crimp on your ability to make money. So that happened.
That just happened to be chance that they're like, hey, we're peace out, and then you ended up getting results back. And did you know that you were not? Was there some kind of signs that you may be sick? I mean, how did you end up finding out?
Yeah, so in retrospect, I think there were signs, but I didn't notice them at the time. I actually just thought I was getting lazy, and actually the other attorney that quit, I don't really blame him because I was relying on him too much, and I wasn't really focused on what I was doing. And he was saying things like, "Oh, we should be focusing in this area or that area, and we should do this and we should do that." And I was like, "No," and I was kind of ignoring him. And when I look back at it in retrospect, a lot of that was because I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, one, and then the other part was that I was sick and I was getting progressively more fatigued. The symptoms of leukemia, when your white blood cell goes up, blood cell count goes up, you just sort of, it represses your red blood cell count, which means you just have less oxygen, and so you just have less energy, and you start to get sluggish. Even my vision was starting to blur a little bit, but I didn't really notice it till I went to Peru. I went to Peru in August of 2008. Machu Picchu is up in the mountains. Get up at elevation when you're a little bit less able to process oxygen. It becomes really obvious something's wrong. So that's really what happened.
So here you are in the moment. Machu Picchu, am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Which I know, again, and doing a little homework, that was your number one item on your bucket list. So you're in this moment of just extreme beauty, yet you're noticing something about yourself, which is, it's got to be a polarizing feeling of what.
And my wife was really frustrated with me at the time because she was like, "Man, you're just so lazy. You don't even want to get out and look at stuff." And Machu Picchu was the last thing on my bucket list at that time. Actually, I had made this short bucket list a few years earlier. That included just old stuff that I wanted to see, the pyramids in Egypt and Petra in Jordan, which is that's the Indiana Jones Last Crusade place, and then Machu Picchu, which is an ancient Incan city on top of the mountains in the Andes. And when I got to Machu Picchu, I was sort of looking down at the city and I was thinking, everything's really great, but something's off, right? And I didn't know what it was. I really didn't find out for about 2 or 3 more weeks that I had the leukemia. It wasn't for another year or so after that I really, came to the full rock bottom sort of place. But at the same time, I had a pretty positive mindset through the whole thing. Something was off for sure. I wasn't as passionate as I should have been, but I also if you had come up to me any one of those days, even the day I got diagnosed, and said to me, "Hey, how's your day going?" I would have been like, "Yeah, it's pretty good." I just didn't. I had a deep rooted belief that it was a choice whether or not you had good or bad days, and that carried me through a lot of that darkness. I was in the hospital 10 o'clock at night the first day I was diagnosed, and my brother came to see me and he said, "Yeah, today must be a bad day." It was almost like he was saying, I knew that it was impossible to give up bad days completely. And I was just kind of like, no, actually I didn't get diagnosed until late in the day, and most of the day was pretty good. And, worry about tomorrow when tomorrow comes. And I also felt pretty satisfied. I mean, I'd done a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do. I mean, I'd finished my bucket list. Pro tip there, though, right? Don't ever finish your bucket list or you find yourself in the hospital a few days later.
But because you were still young at that point. I mean, how old were you?
I was 30 years old, yeah.
30, yeah. So you still had, God willing, another 30 plus years, hopefully, obviously.
Well, we know for sure
years.
we know for sure I had at least 13 more because we made it this far. But
there you go. But let me pause. Do you mind? Because you threw something in there that our audience may not understand what you're referring to. It was, you talked about not having any bad days. And I know when you were 17 years old, you made this decision to give up bad days. And I was going to ask you if you've been successful up until that point, but now you're talking about like your brother kind of said, "Hey, it sounds like there may be one more bad day or something. Take it away."
Yeah. So the thing is, like, so I mean, okay, first of all, yes, I've been successful. I feel very comfortable saying now that it's been more than a quarter of a century since I had my last bad day, which is awesome. Obviously some days were harder than others. I mean, I don't want people to think, sometimes people say, well, you must be lying, or like, or it must be nice or whatever. And those, I mean, those are legitimate ways to understand it. But what it really comes down to is good and bad stuff happens to everyone every single day.
Right.
And
it's perspective, right? How you react to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I always say is, like, the trick is to focus on the positive and sort of minimize the negative. It's not hide the negative. It's deal with the negative and then embrace the positive. And I didn't really understand how it worked at the time. It's some element of affirmations. I was saying to myself when I first gave up bad days, I'd be like, today's a good day. Today's a good day. Today's a good day. Just over and over again. And this was back in the mid 90s. And I didn't know what affirmations were. YouTube didn't exist. So I never heard of Tony Robbins or any of that. I just went out and did it. I just said, today is a good day, over and over again.
It was almost like a survival tool for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, it really was. And then one day I walked into a convenience store, and the guy behind the counter said to me, he said, "Hey, how you doing today?" And I just said, I never have bad days. And then I went, holy crap, I never have bad days. I just realized that it had been a month or two since I'd had my last bad day. And then it just kind of became a thing where I defined myself that way. And by like fully embrace, and this is something that Dr. Jamil actually like really talks about a lot, is this, like, if you fully embrace yourself into an identity, it becomes who you are. And if it becomes who you are, then it controls how you respond. Right. And that's really what it's about. It's about, if you just constantly focus on the positive stuff and you constantly are looking for the lessons. So when I got, I'll give you an example. Earlier this year, I got melanoma, right? How's that for good luck? 2 cancers in one lifetime. I'm winning the cancer lottery here.
Checking the boxes. Oh my God.
Yeah. And so I at first I was like, man, this is really bad luck. And I started thinking like, I know a lot of people that have one cancer and they're fine, but then people that have like multiple cancers, it seems like it just sort of piles up and then you're just toast. And so for like, I don't know, 15 minutes, I was like, man, this is really bad. And then I said, I went to my wife's work and I told her, I said, hey, I just found out I have melanoma. And she was like, yeah, that's really terrible. And then the next thought after I said it out loud, and the first person I told out loud, right? I just said it out loud. And the next thought that came into my mind was, this is going to make a great story on a podcast someday. And you know what? It has, right? Because I'm telling it right now. And this is the first time I've told it on a podcast. So, wow. So congratulations for getting that scoop.
There you go. I didn't have that written down in my notes because you're the first. You just shared it, so our audience heard for the first time. But man, will I say, first of all, again, I appreciate you being here and opening up. This is not easy stuff to talk about. You and I, this is a unique situation for me. Usually when I interview someone, I either know them from a networking opportunity or a friend already introduced me to someone, and I'm like, man, your story is awesome. Let's get you on the show. But this is Dr. Jamil just sent that email and said, hey, man, Jeff is really cool. Check his story out, and kind of repeated that same thing to you about me. And that was a couple months ago now. And all of a sudden, here we are meeting each other for the first time. And I feel like in watching that video, and I'll actually link that in the show notes, is your website, jeffreyholst.com, and also your podcast website. I want people to know they can go to that. It's oldfashionedrealestate.com, and your social is all clickable. So if anyone wants to learn more about Jeff, go and do that. But it's and just seeing your story, I feel like I got to know you a lot quicker through that video, which is actually one of the benefits of doing it. But it also shows that like you're willing to get vulnerable. That's the word you used a couple minutes ago, because it's a way to connect with someone. If you came out and put this like facade on and you're trying to be something you really weren't, how far does that get? And so you were really, by being real and being open, you can help more people. And I feel like that, I know that's why you're here. Something I want to get to, and we're going to do a quick timeout after this next question. living your last life ever. That's kind of summarizing what we're talking about here. And now you got this other curveball thrown at you with melanoma, but I know that it's not going to slow you down from your mindset and mentality. It doesn't sound like it. I saw this on your website. I want to quote it actually. It says, anyone can go to Egypt if they want, but they don't believe that they can. So doing it is all about priorities and deciding, making that decision to make it make sense to you, right? What do you feel is the greatest reason that so many people have these limiting beliefs?
I think about that a lot, and it's interesting that Egypt thing because Egypt's I'm really passionate about Egypt. I love it, and that's why I put that there. And then, actually later today, I'm going to meet with a guy who's 81 years old. He said he's wanted to go to Egypt since he was 7 years old. Right, literally since he was 7 years old. He's lived this extraordinary life. He's done almost everything he's ever wanted to do. He's never gone to Egypt, and now he's in hospice. And I was going to go to Egypt with him last year, and then COVID happened, and I'm still trying to work it out. I don't think we're going to be able to do it because he said to me, I just think it's too risky. I'm too worried about it. And I just want to hurry up and die. That's literally what he said to me. And I'm still working on that. That's why I'm like, man, we got to go. Like, we got to talk about this. So we're going to meet again today, and hopefully he'll do it. The hospice people have approved him to travel. And I mean, my philosophy on this is like, hey man, like, what do you got to lose at this point? Like,
I was thinking the same thing.
You're on the way out, and he knows it too, and
Yeah.
he understands that on one level. So to answer your question, like, what's the limiting belief for him? I don't know. I don't know what his unique issue is, but I do know this. We all have limiting beliefs, right? Like, one thing I've really wanted to do for a long time is I wanted to move to the Caribbean. And I didn't do it. And like, sometimes it takes some kind of huge thing to motivate yourself to do it, right? So like, just last week, I announced publicly on my Facebook, and my wife and I have been thinking about this all year, that I'm moving to Puerto Rico at the end of this year. So, I mean, I'm doing this. Like, I mean, I'm looking for a place. My wife's already put in her notice to quit her job, and we're moving to Puerto Rico. And what happened is, when I got diagnosed with melanoma, it was 2 days before I was going to make a weekend trip to Puerto Rico with a friend of mine. And I got to Puerto Rico, and I was looking around, and I was like, it's my last life ever. I'm telling people all the time, this is the last chance we get to live this life. And like, I just got to do this now. And, now the melanoma's fine. They excised it. Like, I don't have any evidence of melanoma anymore. Like, I'm probably going to be fine.
Give me a fist bump.
No doubt, right? Give them the virtual fist bump. And that's awesome. But the thing is, I don't know, if I hadn't been diagnosed that week and hadn't happened to be in Puerto Rico that week, would I be going to Puerto Rico this year? I don't know. But Jamil actually was super helpful with this. Dr. Jamil, I talked to him about it right after I was diagnosed with melanoma, and he was like, well, if you want to move to Puerto Rico, like, maybe you should go to Puerto Rico and visit for a while longer than 3 days. So I immediately went home and I booked a month-long trip to Puerto Rico. So I spent a month earlier this year there, and I went, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And I think that's the thing. Like, a lot of times limiting beliefs are not even really a belief. It's just a lack of belief in the ability to do something. And so if you can inspire people, and that's why I share my story, that's why I put it on my website, anyone can go to Egypt. It's actually cheaper to go to Egypt than it is to go to Disney World. Like, people go to Disney World all the time, and they say to me, oh, I wish I could go to Egypt. And I'm like, yeah, you can. It's an $800 plane ticket, and it costs like $50 a day for a hotel when you get there. You can do it, I promise.
It just seems so literally foreign. Like, it almost to me seems like a movie set when I think of Egypt. When I think of any like the pyramids or like, these wonders of the world. I mean, I live pretty close to Niagara Falls, which is one of the wonders of the world, which is kind of cool. But we kind of take it for granted when you live close to them. Like, there's people that come over the world to see this, and we're just like, it's like 45 hour up the road.
And that's true of the pyramids too, by the way. I have a friend who lives in an apartment building, and if you go up on the top floor of the apartment building and look out the window, you can see the Sphinx, right? and and he doesn't go look at the Sphinx. You know what I mean? Like he's just like the Sphinx. Like it's
if
amazing.
He sees it, it's because he's looking for something else, and it's in the peripheral
it's
vision.
Because he's trying to find the Pizza Hut or something. And I know that sounds weird, but there's actually a Pizza Hut right there. And if you sit on the top floor of the Pizza Hut, you can look at the Sphinx. And the restaurant workers, they're like, complaining about not getting enough tips, and I'm going, the Sphinx is right there.
Yeah, I definitely want to visit. I'm going to go see the Pizza Hut, and I'm going to take a photo on Instagram, and I'll tag you in it. Hey, I'm at the
you
Pizza
definitely
Hut.
should. And I think if people look back on my Instagram, they might find a picture of me. I know I have it somewhere, but I put a picture of like, I'm going to find it and put it on Instagram like right now. But it's like looking out the window, and it's the Pizza Hut logo, and it's like sort of floating above the Sphinx because of that.
It seems so like, it almost seems like a weird sci-fi movie where you're watching like, the pyramids and everything, and it's supposed to be ancient day, and then all of a sudden it pans out and there's a Pizza Hut, and like cue the Twilight Zone music,
It is weird though, because like most of the stuff around the pyramids is just desert, but there's this one side where the city, because it's not too far from Cairo, like you can fly to the airport in Cairo and be at the pyramids 30 minutes after you're on the ground. Because it's really close. But it's like there's a road that goes out. It's called Pyramids Road. It goes out from like downtown Cairo to the pyramids. And once you get to the pyramids, there's nothing else there. It's the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of a weird situation. It's not like
you kind of see it and you're like, all right, let's get back to what we got to do.
Yeah. The tourism infrastructure is the only reason there's a Pizza Hut there, right? Like it's there because people show up.
Yeah. Let me just get back. I want to reel us back into the interview because I know I have like 20 more minutes with you. There's so much more we could talk about. Sure. We're going to get to a quick break, but just to kind of wrap up the thought on the limiting beliefs thing, I think, the kind of setup of that question was, I personally feel, and I'm glad that you shared your take on it, is it's not the person themselves typically that has the limiting. We were not born with that limiting belief is my point. It's something that's instilled in us throughout school age all the way up into college until like, these are the good jobs to have. These are what's okay by society. This is weird by society. This is acceptable. And, I live in Buffalo, New York. I'm a New Yorker, right? Western New York. We just don't talk about like, hey, what are you doing on your summer vacation? We don't talk about going to Egypt. Disney, it's to take the family. It's because it's sold to us since we were 5 years old. And so it becomes familiar, and familiar isn't always, I'm not saying anything's wrong with Disney. I just took my daughter there this summer.
No, I love Disney.
But it's just an example. With it. It's an example of like one of the most common destination places, and something that just seems like it's like out of touch or out of reach or whatever. And like you said, man, living that last life ever, every day you wake up and you're just like, this is, and it sounds like a cheesy Instagram post, but it really is like the best mentality to have, because I'll tell you what, my father passed away during this pandemic in December of 2020. I lost my grandmother. Okay, my dad was only 69, so I feel he was robbed young. My grandma was in her mid-80s, so she definitely had a nice life, but still, obviously crushing to lose a close family member. My buddy's dad passed away. I mean, I have another friend, his mom just recently passed away. And so this like end of life has just been on my mind way too much lately, and it makes me think I'm 35. What are more things I want to do, and why am I not doing it? So that's my question to the audience. I want you to guys internalize that. What do you want to do, and what's actually holding you back? Because if it's an $800 plane ticket and you're busting your ass making more than $800 a week, most likely, then why don't you save up one of your 52 pay stubs and go and enjoy a wonder in the world? It doesn't have to be Egypt, but what's your version of Jeff's Egypt? And that's the question. We're going to take a quick time out. When we return, we're going to unpack more of Jeffrey's story, his incredible story. We will be right back. Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. All right, we're back in action with Jeff, and you guys can connect with him. It's actually Jeffrey on LinkedIn, so make sure if you're searching for it, type in Jeffrey, Jeffrey, and check out his website, jeffreyholst.com. Those links are all clickable in the show notes. We're going to dive into a cool story that I heard Jeff talking about in one of his videos. It was about Michelangelo, right? And there was a story about him throwing the chisel at the Pope. And I don't know much about the story or that time, really, so I want to make sure I'm not bastardizing history. But it's like, it sounds like a bad joke. You got Michelangelo and the Pope sitting in a room. But seriously, tell how that actually started all this inspiration for you.
So first of all, I've never been able to verify that this is actually a true story. This is my recollection of something that I learned when I was in college. The professor could have made it up for all I know, right? So I don't want to claim some kind of historical significance.
I did look for it and I didn't find it. So
I've never been able to find it either. Although I talk about it enough, it's going to show up somewhere sometime, right? And if not, I'll just write a fake book on it.
Someone's going to make a book or movie on it if it's not you.
Yeah. So there's this sculpture by Michelangelo called the Moses, and the sculpture is in this little church up on top of a hill behind the Colosseum. It's called San Pedro in Vincole, I think, something like that. I don't speak Italian, but it basically means St. Peter in chains. And the sculpture is the seated Moses with a flowing beard and robes, and he's got horns. That's from a misinterpretation of an old biblical text that said he had the horns of truth, which was probably more likely something like a halo in the original text, but it got mistranslated. Anyway, so Michelangelo sculpts this sculpture for the centerpiece for the tomb of Pope Julius II, I believe. This is all historically accurate. I know, I've been there, I've seen it, I've read about it. In fact, Sigmund Freud said that the Moses of Michelangelo was the greatest sculpture ever created by human hands. And this is comparing it against, we're talking about the greatest sculptor probably ever, did Michelangelo's David, right?
Right. I don't think too many people are going to argue with that.
Yeah, people aren't going to argue that Michelangelo is the greatest sculptor ever, I don't think. But he has some really good sculpture, so to claim that this particular one is the best was kind of interesting. And this professor that I had when I was in undergrad was telling this story about Michelangelo and said that when they went to unveil this sculpture, they basically pulled a sheet off of it, and there's a small group, including the Pope, and this is going to be the centerpiece of the Pope's tomb. And Michelangelo just kind of stared at it, and he didn't say anything. And finally, one of his students was like, master, you have to say something. And he just took his chisel and he threw it actually at the sculpture and said, one word, move, just move. Right. And, the implication was that he was so passionate about this particular sculpture that he thought it would just get up and move. And you also have to remember, he's doing this in front of the Pope, which is the president of the world, right? At the time, during the Renaissance, there's no one even close to as powerful as the Pope. There's no one that had that kind of power. Today, alive, the president doesn't have that kind of power. Maybe Putin does in Russia, but not for the whole world, right? The Pope has it for the whole world. And it was just to do something like that in front of the Pope was shocking. And the thing is, obviously the sculpture didn't get up and move, and the story could be completely fake. But what it said to me at that time when I was sitting in this classroom was, there's nothing in my life that I'm so passionate about that I would throw a chisel at the Pope, right? I just wouldn't do it. I left that classroom, and I'd never traveled outside the U.S. except for to Canada in my life. Maybe I'd been to Mexico, right across the border or something, but I hadn't gone really anywhere. And, you live near Canada, so, I grew up in Michigan. So going across the border to Canada was something we did when we wanted to drink when we're 19, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And, I've been to Niagara Falls and stuff like that, but I hadn't really been anywhere super far away. And I literally left there and I called 1-800 Priceline. This is before Priceline.com, because this is back in the 90s. Sure. or maybe, yeah, it was like 98 or 99, somewhere around, I guess 99. And called 1-800 Priceline. I took my income tax refund and I bought a plane ticket to Europe literally the next day. And I didn't even have a passport. I had to expedite my passport because it was like, this was in like the spring, and it was like 6 weeks later I was going to be leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And I got on this plane to London, and I went on my own little quest to find my passion. And the idea was I was going to start in London, and I was going to work my way with a backpack down to Rome to see this sculpture by Michelangelo, and en route have a grand and epic adventure. And I did all that. I had an amazing time. It changed my life, no doubt about that. But I got to this sculpture, and I just was like, yeah, it's nice, but it didn't, it didn't solve everything.
It didn't move.
For me.
You mean it didn't move?
Yeah, it didn't move for me either, right?
Yeah.
So I walked outside of the church, and I sat down on the front steps, and I looked down at the Colosseum, and I thought, I like seeing old stuff. And that's when I made that bucket list we were talking about earlier. I went, well, like what else is old besides the Colosseum? And the only things that came to my mind were Petra, Machu Picchu, and the pyramids. And so the next few years were all about just going to see those things for me. So over the next 9 years, I went to law school because I thought I could make money being a lawyer, and I did make money being a lawyer, but that's not the right reason to go to law school. And then I used that money to go see the things that I wanted to see, and that was fine. And there's nothing wrong with that strategy, but if I were doing it again, I would have leaned right into that. I need to find my passion, because I know about Michelangelo. He was probably much more happy carving that sculpture of Moses than he would have been just like going, it'd be kind of cool to see the pyramids, right?
Sure.
Like
he was doing his art that served the purpose.
Yeah, and if I wanted to be an archaeologist, sure, then I need to figure out how to get to the pyramids. And I do think everyone should see them once in their life because they're unbelievable. But
it's still like
the same time,
amazing to think of how they built and developed. That's a whole nother podcast
the
episode.
The scale thing is unbelievable too. Just like a quick side note on that, the Great Pyramid of Cheops is 430 feet tall. So that's 43 stories, and it sits on a hill, right? And 5,000 years old. In fact, when Cleopatra was pharaoh, was only 2,000 years ago. That means it's less long ago that Cleopatra was pharaoh than the pyramids were old when she was pharaoh.
When she was pharaoh,
because they were 3,000 years old.
What's also interesting is you have the pyramids, but then you don't have much other architecture like it from that time.
Anywhere in the world. And the thing about the pyramids,
so whatever techniques they were using are just like one and done, and they just like, we don't do this anymore.
Well, they made several of them. There's probably like 7 or 8 pyramids of that size in the region. But yeah, I mean, it was.
My point though is like, I just want to spit this out is, once we just developed the first skyscraper, then every city had 5 to 10 to 25 skyscrapers, and then every city in the country figured it out, and developers built up America. But like that technology or whatever technology they were using, which is mind-boggling because they almost didn't have anything other than like hand tools. How the heck they did it, which is why all these like ancient alien stories are fun to tune into. But
I mean, and I have no theories on that. I suspect they just used a lot of slave labor, which is probably why they didn't keep doing it, because it
probably really took 1,000 years to do. Like you probably didn't even get to see your work come to fruition. Your generation might have been like putting in one level. Like your entire 50-year existence on planet Earth might have been like doing one level of labor.
There's precedence for that in Europe. Like the great cathedrals of Europe took hundreds of years to build, right? So it's not inconceivable to assume that these things were designed by one person and completed generations later. In fact, it's probably the most likely scenario.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That was like your whole purpose was. It's sad when you think about it, if that's how it really was. If they weren't doing anything other than labor. Especially if you were forced
to do something you didn't want to do. I mean, talk about not being passionate about your work, right?
But on the flip side, what's interesting though is that it's such a remarkable development that even though we don't know the names of all the people, like in a sense they do. It's horrible to think
they're
whole
still.
life.
I mean,
but
they have left a lasting impact.
The people that built that left this masterpiece. So it is kind of interesting of like the sacrifice. If you think I never thought about it until this moment that people sacrificed to build this thing, and like even though we don't know who it was, their legacy is all part of this amazing structure.
And I actually, I haven't thought about it that way either, but I actually, whenever I find like an old coin, I always think like if it's like a 1905 penny or something, I think like, man, I wonder who had this penny last. You know what I mean? Like if
That'd
it's
be
like
a cool short film, wouldn't it? Just to follow,
like,
follow
just
money.
Try to figure out like, what did that mean to this person that first had this penny?
I'm going to do a short film on that. I'm going to like follow a quarter around, and it's going to start somewhere and end somewhere, but somehow the beginning and end are going to have more meaning than just the traveling of a coin, but it's going to show. That's a really cool idea.
I like that idea. Let me know when you get it done. I'll definitely watch it.
Maybe it's like a grandfather, like flipping it like on the side, like in the 50s or something, with like a Coke bottle in his hand.
Like a lucky quarter or something like that.
Yeah,
that
and then like you see like a baby born, and like someone like puts money on a counter, and like they're holding the thing, and then you see it's an old man, and somehow it signifies that it's the same person, and that coin is like in the same scene. I just gave the idea away. Someone's going to take it, run with it, and make him get a million hits on YouTube.
Just go bleep it out. It's fine. This part of your show will just be like,
yeah. All right. Hey, Randall, cut that last bit out. All right. Sounds good. All right. He's our editor. All right, cool. So let's dive right back. And we got 7 more minutes. We're talking about creating stories. We're talking about your life story. So why don't we go right into this one? You're the author and protagonist in your own life story, and you get to write the ending. God willing, I know you're dealing with a lot right now medically too, but you continue to live a prosperous life. You're looking back, you're reflecting on it. You get to define your legacy. What would that be?
So I think about this a lot, actually. I want to help 1 million people see that they can achieve their goals. Like that's like the overarching goal. But when I really like deep, dark secret is that I just really want to be an old guy in a bar. And I want the young kid next to me to be interested enough in what I've done that they listen to what I have to say. Because I figure if you're like, 90 years old in a bar and some like 22-year-old punk kid is like interested in hearing what you have to say, then you lived your life right.
You know what I just thought about? That coin story is kind of relevant to what you just talked about, but instead of just passing on the coin, you pass on the inspiration. So now like your life, if it's the old man at the bar, maybe that guy's 75 years old. So he's lived 75 years. And then it's like he passes a little wisdom on to a 21-year-old. And now that 21-year-old for 50 years lives it. And then he at 75 passes it on to another 20-year-old. And it keeps going.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the impact that you have, it's actually really like I have a show around Last Life Ever, right? Like we have a podcast called Last Life Ever, and we just try to interview people that are doing inspirational things. And the reason we do that is because we think it's helpful to us as a society, as an individual, to be exposed to big ideas. Because that's what we were talking about earlier about like overcoming limiting beliefs. If you see that someone else can do something, then it becomes more reasonable for you to do it. And the risk, of course, is sometimes you're like, wow, that person is just an extraordinary person. So the goal is to sort of dig into their story, which is why I love your show, actually, and say, because what I know about Jeff Holst is I'm an ordinary guy. I might be living an extraordinary life, and I've certainly had a lot of really cool things. In fact, one of the things I always think about is the word extraordinary is really 2 different words. It's like extra and ordinary, right? Yeah. So like it really is. It's like living beyond the ordinary, right? Like and you do that by
it's one of those words that literally means, if you dissect it, what it's supposed to mean.
Yeah, and that's actually surprisingly rare when it comes to taking words apart. Like they actually fit. But in this particular case, if you look at your sort of ordinary existence and say like, what can I do that's just a little bit extra, right? Then you get to be extraordinary. And that's, to me, that's like, it's freaking gold.
And it's not just one event. It's the daily mentality. So if we look back, and guys, like if you take what Jeffrey just shared with us over the last 45 minutes, it's not one activity. It's not one day. It's not trying to live a good day and not a bad day one time. He does it. It's these little micro victories in his own well-being that he's built up. And then he's also you've also been amazing in saying, I'm just going to take some time for myself. I'm going to go to Peru for a month. You're going to do 3 days. Jamil kind of helped encourage you to do it for a month. And like most people listening to this that don't have a gun to their head, that aren't living in a horrible third world situation, can get up and do their own versions of this stuff. And there's excuses already. People are thinking of excuses like, no, Mike, I can't, but I can't. And the first thing they're doing wrong is saying the word can't. How can you do it? Okay, maybe it's not this year, but if you start focusing on it every day, I'll tell you what, before you know it, you're going to figure out how you can do it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I went to Egypt, you know what I did? I just started thinking to myself, I'm going to go to Egypt. Like, that's going to be a thing. I'm going to go to Egypt. And, I've never been like an enormous law of attraction kind of person. Like, but there are certain times where this seems to have worked for me. I kept saying, I'm going to go to Egypt. I'm going to go to Egypt. I'm going to go to Egypt. I'm the kind of guy that goes to Egypt. I just kept saying that. And then I walked into and I'm sure it's, you recognize this stuff. It's like a reticular activating system, like whatever's familiar to your subconscious is what you see. I walked into a student like fair kind of thing, and I saw across the room a picture of the pyramids, and I walked over to it, and it was a study abroad opportunity to go to Egypt, and no one had signed up, and there was a scholarship available, and I was going to be able to go to Egypt, and it was going to be on scholarship and also like, student loans. And I was like, well, I got to do it because that's what I do. I'm the kind of guy that goes to Egypt. And so I went to Egypt but I didn't have any spending money. And so I thought, well, I'm not sure I can afford it. And I started trying to talk myself out of it. And then I went, no, what I'm going to do is every time I pay a bill, I'm going to go to the post office and I'm going to put a $20 bill in the stamp machine and get one stamp. And I'm going to take like 19 gold dollars, those like Sacagawea gold dollars, and I'm going to throw them in a bucket. And then by the time it's time to go to Egypt, 6 months from now, I'm going to have money to pay for my stuff.
You had a bucket of Sacagawea dollars?
I did. And there was like 950 of them when I got
that. That literally is like one of my favorite stories on this show.
I've never told it ever, but like
we just celebrated 100 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's the wheels are turning. Yeah. I think that's incredible. Like another lesson I'm learning from you is that you're creative. Like I need to save money, but I need to do something different, because if I just put $20 on my kitchen table, I'm going to go take that when I need to go get a cup of coffee, or I'm running to the store, so I need to get gas in the tank. $20 will just about give me half tank. And all of a sudden the $20 is spent. But if you put it in like a funky Sacagawea coin that's going to be sitting in
you're just not going to accidentally.
You're not going to accidentally spend it. And that actually hit my heart too, because I remember my grandparents, before they passed away, gave each of their grandkids, I think it was a 10 or 20 stack of Sacagaweas. And I think I still have mine as just like a remembrance. I was going to spend $20 on
it. I kept one, by the way. I kept one in my drawer, and I carried it a lot for a long time.
Yeah.
Actually, a quick side note on if people want to save money, I wrote this article a long time ago. I call it the luxury tax. And the idea was anytime I spent money on something that was a luxury, I would tax myself to do two things. It would discourage me from spending. So I just tacked 20% on. If I wanted to buy a cruise and it cost $1,000, I had to have $1,200. And I'd take the $200 and set it aside into a specific online investment account that I used. And I let that money build up. And I called that my luxury tax / Caribbean house fund. And I just, every time I spent extra money, I always put that money in there. I kept a spreadsheet, and I would look at my credit card bills every month, and I go, you went to the movies, it cost you $14. You owe $1, you owe $2.80 or whatever it is to that. And then I kept ramping that up. Mm-hmm. And I ended up saving up, tens of thousands of dollars doing that over a few year period.
Dude, that's incredible.
I think those kind of tricks, I just call it like tricking yourself into saving.
Yeah, it's changing the way you think about something. That I know a couple people in the financial space, and what they do is there's a Profit First book by Mike Michelangelos. It's great. I'm throwing that out. Anyone who's interested in that.
That's great. I met him once. Unbelievable story.
He's a cool guy too. I haven't met him yet, but I'd like to have him on the show at some point. But the idea is that because we act in a way and we kind of constantly do the same things, his thing was trying not to learn a new trick. It was like, if your brain's already so used to operating in this way, just like plug something different into what you're already doing, but have it go to good use. You're saying like, do something a little different. I like both mentalities. It's not right or wrong. It's just that you are doing something that if you didn't change your paradigm, you're going to be the same dude 5 years from now.
Yeah, well, and I'm not going to speak for Michelangelos, but I mean, I think what he was doing was something. His is a little bit different, right? It is.
Yeah.
It's a different way of looking at it, and he was shifting his mindset. He was saying like, what am I already doing that I can optimize? And that's really what I'm talking about too. It's like it's hard to put me. I'm very resistant to budgeting. Like I hate budgeting. Like I can't do it. Like if I write a budget, I'm going to either not pay attention to it or I'm going to purposely avoid my budget for the rest of my life because I'm just really anti-budgeting. But if I came up with this thing that was like, hey, if you want to spend this money, you just have to have a little extra and you have to set it aside. It worked really well for me. The John Sofrak, who wrote this amazing book, The Wealthy Gardener, he talks about it as niching, right? Like it's like, or there's another thing he calls it, I can't remember right now, but the basic idea is like there's certain things that you're just naturally good at, and if you focus on those things, whatever that is, it becomes a lot easier to like be successful, right? Like you're never going to be successful if you don't put in hard work, but you're also not able to, like I'm never going to, I mean, it's just not reasonable to do everything, right? You have to pick something.
Like, are you going to be an Olympic Hall of Fame ice hockey goalie, or just something random?
I mean, and if you are, that's cool. But then, like, you better be already good at ice skating.
But not that's not everybody. Like, that's not like there's a calling, and that like some people are the entrepreneurial.
Yeah, calling part, and then also like saying, okay, what do I like doing, and then also what am I good at, and find the overlap between those two things, and then just go do that. And for me, like I'm good at coming up with weird creative things and like taking complicated stuff and making it simple. So
Sacagawea coins, man, I love it.
Yeah, throw them in a bucket. I probably ought to start doing that again.
This last 45 minutes to an hour, however long we've been going, has been some of my favorite time talking to anybody, whether it's recorded for the show, not for the show. Jeff, I really, I'd love to have you as a friend, someone that I can check in with, see how you're doing. I'm rooting for you. Check in with me, see how I'm doing. But thank you again for taking your time to be with our audience. Then we got to wrap up and get on to the rest of our day. You've been fantastic. And I just want you to let people know again, because I didn't even get into your real estate story. You have this incredible real estate. That's a whole nother episode. Tell people how they can find your podcast, both of them. And if they want more information on your real estate, because we didn't even touch it today, and they maybe came here like, oh, I wanted to get some of his tips, you have episodes of content. So
of course we do.
How can people find you?
Yeah, so the old-fashioned real estate show, like the short pitches, we just drink old fashions, like the bourbon drink. I got my shirt right here, old-fashioned real estate on today. We drink bourbon, old fashions, and talk about real estate. It's best on YouTube because it's more fun if you can see us drink, but you can listen to it on all the podcasting apps too. And we have a Facebook group, old-fashioned real estate Facebook group or something like that too.
Yeah.
And so you can come hang out in there with us, and we just throw out real estate knowledge. It's generally not a guest show, right? It's usually just myself and my partner. Pick a topic, talk about it. You know, how do you predict the market cycle? What's going to happen in 2021? Like, you know, all this kind of stuff, right? And then the other show I have, Last Life Ever, is just about living the best version of your life. And that comes down to, like I was saying earlier, interviewing people doing extraordinary things, but also interviewing like extraordinary people, but ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that's a really big passion of mine. And we have a Last Life Ever private group on Facebook, which is the best place to like sort of get exposed to that podcast. And then, you know, like you were saying earlier, everything in my world is Jeffrey Holst. So Jeffrey Holst on Facebook, Jeffrey Holst on Instagram, Jeffrey Holst on LinkedIn. I'm all over those places. Come hang out with me wherever you happen to social media, and then I'll probably be there too. I think I even have Jeffrey Holst TikTok now. So I don't put too much on my TikTok account, so that might not be the best place to find me.
But you're active on Instagram, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram. I like
YouTube.
Instagram. Yep, YouTube
channel,
of course. Yeah. And I just started a Puerto Rican YouTube channel too, because like I'm just like a nonstop producer of random content. That's called Puerto Rican Life, and we just talk about our pending move to Puerto Rico and why it's important to me, and it all synergizes into that last life ever philosophy, but it's just focused on like how great Puerto Rico is as a place.
Yeah. You're an incredible person, man. I just want you to take a second after we hang up this call and just reflect on like the cool things you have done. Live in gratitude for that moment. Feel it. I don't want you to just say it out loud or to yourself internally, but feel it. You've got a really cool thing. We don't know what tomorrow looks like, but realize that what you've done is not only cool for yourself, but all the people who know you, love you, and have followed your story on social and YouTube are absolutely being inspired. You got one of one right here, your audience member. If anyone else is tuning in, it's a bonus. I got so much value from talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time. It's also Blood Cancer Awareness Month in September as we record. We have a leukemia survivor on the show here, and I recently interviewed another leukemia survivor, so that's heavy on my heart. So again, thank you for sharing and opening up your story. You're helping a lot of people out.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
I'd like to give a huge shout out to everyone for tuning in, especially those who listen all the way to the end to hear this message. Seriously, I appreciate you, and my guests do as well. Giving a quick reminder to subscribe to this show. It's completely free and will allow you to receive notifications when new episodes are released. If you'd like to provide a tip as a gift, you can do so via patreon.com/mikedup. It's spelled MIKED up. Patreon.com/mikedup. You can give as little as $1 per month or as much as you'd like. Every dollar is greatly appreciated and completely unexpected. Appreciate your reviews and your messages coming in on social as well. Keep them coming. Your feedback is valuable and absolutely means the world to me. You can check out more episodes and content at mikeduppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, and it's at Mike DiCioccio, MIKEDICIOCCIO. Thank you so much for your continued support. You guys know what to do. Be great and be grateful.